Four Faces of Man, LPIN. This one's a very special one. This one was put in 22,500 BC by the Eoni races. This was the period of time when the Eoni massacre occurred because Thoth betrayed everybody. Now, if you look at the shape, does this remind you of anything? Just look at one of the faces. Yeah. Yeah, Easter Island was a main key point, and the people who lived on Easter Island that originally had put up those structures, there used to be lots more faces around the planet. It was in commemoration, almost like symbolizing that we are still here. They were the Grail lines that put up these particular structures, and most of them were taken down. They were also frequency runners, all right? The rocks themselves, the carved faces themselves, the rocks, were frequency runners that plugged into this system. The Four Faces of Man grid is really part of something called the Guardians of the 12 Pillars. Now notice the angle of the heads. These actually go out. They create pillars of sound and light. They go out and connect to other things. The other things are, there's a Four Faces of Man grid in Inner Earth's Templar, and there's a Four Faces of Man grid in Parallel Earth's Templar. The Four Faces of Man altogether, on the three places, 3 times 4 is 12. They're called the Guardians of the 12 Pillars. Together, they generated enough frequency where the primal light and sound currents from the Kira-Shea and Kundera fields could literally be anchored to create a trion-Miage field, light-sound barrier that would stop Earth from being drawn in, and Inner Earth from being drawn in to Phantom Matrix. Now, there is a problem. This wasn't activated in 22,326 BC because of the stalemate and the invasion and everything. This is what's being activated now. This needs to be activated, I believe, by 2003 end, because this will allow us to generate enough D12 frequency in the planet, enough of the divine blueprint in the planet, where we can basically neutralize a lot of the other stuff the Illuminati groups are going to try to do, and we can prevent pole shift from happening. If this doesn't get activated in the grids, we're not going to be able to stop pole shift. There's been a lot of fancy footwork done because Earth was the last one to activate. The 4 on Parallel had to activate first, then the 4 on Inner Earth before these could activate. They had to do some fancy footwork to get this activated over on Parallel, because Parallel is in reversal now, and it's going in the Phantom. So what they had to do was let it run on reversal and literally transmute it, like through a filter that'll bring it back around. So that's stuff that's being done on a higher level. What we're helping to do with our roundtables is activate the Four Faces of Man LPIN system, so we can begin to build that trion-Miage field, sound light field buffer blanket that's going to allow Earth to move through the stellar activation cycle without going into pole shift. Okay, Letty. Okay, I think the next page I need is page 9. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm skipping through some stuff because there's more detail. When we get, I think it starts on from page 7 through page 10, there's more information on that date line that we started with. I just want to go to the bottom of page 9 before we go. So you see some of how we got to the point where we are now in the drama. Okay, 1980s. Page 9, yes, please. Okay. There'll be more to read on this that literally shows you the whole progression of events, literally about these wormholes, the counter forces fighting over them and trying to use them to activate the APINs to prevent the Christos realignment mission. But when we get down and through here, all right, we had the Pleiadian-Syrian agreements where the Anunnaki temporarily agreed to work with us. Then we had the Emerald Covenant races of the Pleiadian-Syrian agreements used the net where we capped the Falcon temporarily. 1994 and 1998, Pleiadian-Syrian agreements on Anunnaki gained dominance in the Illuminati world management team. They had the Draconians had gained dominance since the Zetas had come in the early 1900s. Now it was going back the other way, where once the Falcon was closed, Falcon wormhole was closed, the Anunnaki got dominion. In 1998, so the arc sparked, which means we went into the capacity to actually fulfill the stellar activation cycle. The grid speeds picked up enough where we could anchor the stellar bridge. Between 1988 and 1999, competing factions of the White Eagle, Falcon, Dragon, Rebel Draconian, White Eagle, Dove, and Phoenix Serpent groups. These are combinations, like the ones who own each of those grids, making deals with each other. Who's going to help who? Okay? They compete for the APIN grid activation. Who can get their grids activated first to take control of the others? for territory dominion and for Illuminati dominance. The New Age movement, Anunnaki, One World Order, astral tagging started, where the Anunnaki started doing heavy-duty implanting in people. This is where workshops became very popular, because you would go to workshops and you would end up coming back plugged in to one of these grids, depending on who was giving the workshop. Yeah, that's why, like, everybody became a channel suddenly in the New Age. And wow, everybody was just awakening so quickly. Oy. The trickery is just amazing. In 1999, the GA continued GFS, renegade. Okay, the Guardian Alliance continues to negotiate with these guys to try to come back into the Pleiadian agreements. January 1st, 2001, the GA Planetary Shields Clinics start, and this is where we didn't know then either. They started us with, they gave us a certain type of thing to do on the beach in Sarasota. What we didn't know, we knew we were going to help to ground the stellar bridge, but we had no idea of the complications that were involved with it. It was because we helped to anchor, we and a few other people in other areas. Like you were, it was really funny, because Az and I weren't together yet at that time, and that was when you were out. Yeah, he'd gotten guidance, and didn't know me. He'd gotten guidance to go out, and he was doing certain type of grid mechanics in an area that totally co-joined with this, and there were other groups that we didn't know each other, but we were each anchoring the frequencies of the D12. We managed to get enough D12 frequency in the grids for the stellar bridge to anchor on a 12-code pulse. That's when the game started to change. All right, July 5th, 2000. There was something called the Treaty of Altair was temporarily made. That was, again, the Guardian races are trying to say to the ones who defected from the Pleiadian agreements, come on, you're not going to get anywhere with this. Come on, can't we be friends and be nice? So they temporarily agreed to enter the Treaty of Altair, which was an update of the Pleiadian agreements. Okay, next page really quick, please. Yes. I want to get to the good part where you find out what Canada has to do with everything.
We're out on 7:30.
Okay.
You're doing real well.
Okay. Okay. August 2000, in Peru, Treaty of Altair races begin the transfer of the Phoenix and the Serpent APIN systems and the Niberian data crystal grid system over to Guardian control. Now this is where it got interesting. Still, some of them were working with the Emerald Covenant. And September 7th, 2000, this is when they pulled the grids out from under us. We were going to England. We were sent to England to do grid work. The Anunnaki groups were supposed to support us there. And instead, they began joining the United Resistance. And they turned their grids over and allowed the secured grids that, we were doing our work on. So we got nailed with psychotronics. And it was not pleasant. I never felt anything hit my field like what hit my field, and I didn't know what it was. We immediately got, our guy said, what was happening was so not good that they couldn't even tell us until we were on secured grid territory. So they literally had to cancel a 5-week tour in England and come back. Anyway, that was like an expensive cancel, but we had to get back so we could find out what happened. This is when the game changed. September 12, 2000 is when the United Intruder Resistance formed and issued their Edict of War against the founders. This is when crisis intervention started, when major crisis intervention mission started. May 2001, so we activated the Amareya Passage and the early opening of Stargate 6 in order to generate enough frequency to begin activation of the 4 faces of man grid and to begin getting the D12 into the grids before what they were doing with the APIN systems made it impossible to get enough critical mass in the grids, because they would have had to go to evac. Because if the other guys get their grids activated, it will, without a doubt, without anything you can do about it, create pole shift, because those frequencies cannot blend naturally with the frequencies that are coming in the stargates. Okay, September 3rd, 2001. All right, this stuff we'll get into when we get back. This is what where we get into what they have been doing since the War Edict and how that's culminated in the trigger event of the World Trade Center and how that's supposed to be a part of something bigger. We can cover that when we get back. Now, what we need to cover before we go, really quick, I know we're in a hurry. Let me see what page. Where'd that go? Okay, yeah. We're going to go to